Welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales. This is the Leadership Quarter. This is a podcast for revenue, sales, and go-to-market leaders and practitioners that is focused on bringing you insights from the best and brightest the world has to offer. The Leadership Quarter is focused on asking the critical questions. How do we develop and empower sales leaders to build strong cultures and teams to hit our growth goals? Experts from around the world give their experiences and opinions on this critical aspect of sales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. And let's dive in to introducing today's guests. Joe Wikert of the Revenue Path Group can best be described as someone who is a lifelong learner with a focus on challenging the mainstream. Sounds like my kind of guy. As the president of Revenue Path Group, Joe is working overtime to drive ideation, impact, and growth by transforming the way sales teams learn. A primary architect of how the priority sale content is delivered to market, Joe is helping teams reshape the way they think about and execute their sales models. One of his recent fascinations is the way artificial intelligence, AI, has the potential to drive continual learners and enhance sales leadership over the next decade. He's placed himself at the forefront of that study and brings a lot of insight to us today. So let's get started with Joe Wikert. Joe, welcome to the Art and Science of Complex Sales.
Well, thanks, Paul. It's a pleasure being here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. I really appreciate you coming on. You were just telling me before we got started here that you just celebrated a big event with your wife.
Yeah, it will be our 40th wedding anniversary a little bit later this year, but we took a nice vacation down to St. Lucia and just really had a great time together.
Well, congratulations, man. 40 Thanks. Years. I know I just passed the 20, I think we were 23. Jen doesn't listen to this very much, so if I get that wrong. But man, 40 is a milestone, and congrats. That is absolutely epic.
Thanks. Yeah, I made a smart move in marrying an awesome woman, so that was the secret.
Well, you're going to tell us the secrets to a lot of things today. So we're going to dive in, and we're going to talk about the secrets that you've been learning about AI and those type of things in AI and sales. But one of the things that I want to start with is, let's just go to your background, how you got into sales, and what you're currently doing with RPG.
Sure. Yeah, happy to talk about that. So, I always looked at myself as a technology person, started my career as a software engineer, but have been involved in sales pretty much throughout my career as well. And so about a year and a half ago, when the opportunity came along to join Revenue Path Group and Brian Gray and the team, I jumped at it because I see that they've developed a really unique methodology in getting in earlier and at a higher level with B2B sales opportunities, and wanted to be part of that, especially helping take this methodology to the next level. And that's where AI comes into play, because I feel like we're on the cusp of a major disruptive event with training and education in general, but in this case, specifically sales training, thanks to the power of AI, and how in the very near future, we're going to have the benefit of these individualized bots that will work with us and help us learn a methodology, learn more about the specifics of the process and skills within my organization, but most importantly, learn about me as an individual and not have a one-size-fits-all approach to training. And the beauty of all that is it'll all happen just through conversations like this one, Paul, as opposed to needing to sit down formally in a class or working through an e-learning module. So it takes it to a whole new level.
Let's start to dive in, because you and I have been having conversations about this probably for 18 months, right? So I think really since you started with the Revenue Path Group, we've been talking about it. What have you been, let's first talk about kind of your observational methodology. How have you been going about understanding the world out there of sales and how that relates to the software and the AI that's coming out these days?
Yeah. So, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what I believe is the biggest promise and potential for AI, and that is relieving all of us, regardless of what your role is, from some of the more mundane tasks that we get involved with, right? And freeing us up to do more meaningful work, okay? And that's a key to this, right? So whether you're in sales or marketing or editorial or some other type of a vocation, AI represents this enormous opportunity to kind of press reset and let the technology help you with the work and let you focus on those more meaningful activities. So from a salesperson's point of view, it's more about building those relationships and identifying and prospecting and figuring out how to use tools to really jump forward a lot faster than you could without them at any stage for a project in the pipeline.
So what are some of the areas then specifically then within sales that you have said, dang, okay, this is a really good use case and AI fits really well here?
Yeah, so let's talk about that prospecting side of things where I want to quickly learn more about an organization that I want to have a conversation with, or maybe I've already started to have a couple conversations with them. You could do it the old-fashioned way, scour the web, maybe subscribe to different news services and so forth, and try to get summaries and distill them into talking points. Or you could ask something like, a generative AI tool like ChatGPT to go ahead and do all of that for you and get you to that first stage a lot faster. All right. So that's a key part of this too, is just, again, the time savings and the help it can offer you, and really summarizing and helping to kind of pull together the short list of what you want to focus on from a prospect, or determining what prospects you want to go after.
And now how does that relate to some of the statements that you made earlier? I mean, you said that we're on a revolutionary point for sales training and sales transformation. That to me all ties into, how is AI going to be helping the sales leader and the HR department and that type of stuff in preparing salespeople for the next challenges. Let's dive into a little bit more about your vision there, because this particular season is around sales leadership on the podcast. So how do you understand and how do you envision 12 months, 24 months, 5 years, how AI is going to be helping out the sales leader and how we drive, great performance across the organization?
Yeah. So let me start by saying I've always likened myself to being a lifelong learner, someone who isn't willing to settle for the status quo. That's why a couple of years ago, I started to see kind of an aligning of the stars for AI from a technology point of view, and decided, hey, I need to really get up to speed on this, and started reading everything I could and following as many influential leaders as I could. But that requires a lot of work, right? And I think AI is going to turn all of us into lifelong learners without having to expend that kind of an effort to really learn. And I say that because, again, today, Gen AI services like ChatGPT are largely text-based. So you type in prompts and you read them, and it's not as smooth flowing as this conversation is that we're having right now. But we're, very, very soon, we're going to see these are all going to be voice enabled, right? So it'll just be like talking to this virtual expert that doesn't exist. Frankly, it's kind of what I think Amazon's Alexa should have been a long time ago. And so they're going to play catch up with it as well. But if I fast forward now 5 years into the future, and I've been using this tool as a salesperson for 5 years, again, it starts to know my strengths and weaknesses and encourages me just through dialogue in helping me figure out, let's say, the methodology that I'm using. If it's the priority sale from RPG, it helps me learn how to get comfortable talking to those higher level decision makers and getting in earlier with them as a strategic advisor, as opposed to being a transactional seller. So all of that will be built into these platforms because of the IP that gets fed to them and that they get trained upon. So 5 years down the road, this platform, this tool, knows more about me than perhaps even my own sales manager does, right? So talking about sales management, one of the beauties of this is it frees a sales manager up for more meaningful work, just like the sales rep will be freed up for more meaningful work. And by that, what I mean is this tool will be an always available feedback loop to that manager so that they can check in and say, all right, we assessed this person 2 years ago. How are they performing against these metrics based on the interactions that the bot has had with them, right? Now, I know that also can start to sound to folks like Big Brother's monitoring, so forth. So there's going to have to be different levels of opting in for this. You're not just going to flip a switch and magically get everyone to buy into it. But I think the benefits of that are going to be so valuable to the sales manager to know at any point in time where this person is and where they, as their manager, can help encourage them and get them to the next level of knowledge, maybe in areas that they would not have been able to do on their own.
So that's a lot. Here's a curveball for you. Have you thought about, because the reason that we're having this conversation and the reason I truly love chatting with you about it is because you have done so much work in this area and just so much research and so much learning and set aside like huge portions of your time and life to do that. But how do you see that impacting a sales culture? Like none of us really knows right now, but what's your best guess?
Yeah. And that's a great question, mostly because I think right now there's so much fear, uncertainty, and doubt around AI that it's like fueled the fire about, we need to stay away from this. It's dangerous, whether it's because proprietary information could be leaked or even the fact that all these tools are prone to hallucinogenic outputs right now. Mm-hmm. I personally had the experience a couple weeks ago with a GPT I've been training with our priority cell IP. And it's like, wait a minute, why did it say something that is complete nonsense? So that happens. And that's going to happen because we're in the very, very early stages of this technology, but it's only going to get better. So to the question of culture, I feel like the more powerful and helpful that these platforms are, the more sales teams will appreciate and value them, right? So, if it reduces the amount of time and the work that it takes to go into closing a deal, let's say, that's one part of it. But I also think what'll be fascinating about this is you have silos of knowledge that exist within any organization, right? And if I happen to know the most about topic X, it's up to me to be able to share that with others. But through platforms like this, and again, there's a lot of calibration and opting in that has to happen. If that knowledge can be fed into the platform, whether it's originally from intellectual property that it gets trained on, or just through the daily interactions with me, that information can then be shared with others across the team without having to set up a formal training program or presentation or anything like that. So again, it all sort of happens behind the scenes. And I think all of this, done right, leads to, I think, positive impact on the culture, making the role, so the salesperson as well as the organization itself, that much more attractive to existing employees as well as prospective new hires.
Let's look at an area of sales that I'm tremendously familiar with. And one of the ones that we have actually, I think Membrane has been one of the pioneers in this space, which is decreasing resistance to data collection, right? And why I put us there as a pioneer is truly because when you start to make systems that can optimize what you're doing on an ongoing basis and actually evidentially help you, right? It's proven that they help you. They're fun to use. They're score-based. All of those things. And we've been at the forefront of that for a long time. How does it take that and kind of up the game? So that idea of data collection, the idea of, doing things that actually work. Yeah. And maybe the question is a little bit long, but I'm just trying to understand where do you see that going in the future with AI?
So I have two thoughts on that, Paul. The first of which would be, I think, one of the biggest challenges with, let's say, a CRM in general is getting users to really fully use it, right? And to record all the important information at each stage of the opportunity. When I've been in sales, I've been guilty of forgetting to do it or just not wanting to do it or what have you, right? But we're already seeing today so many tools, whether it's Teams monitoring calls or Fathom as an add-on, or even built into CRMs, the capability to really analyze those conversations. It's not a huge leap then, again, with the proper calibration, to have that tool extract that data on behalf of the attendees and then preload the system, CRM or what have you, with that information. Now, obviously, you got to be careful because it's got to be accurate information. You probably still want to have some level of human curation of that for the foreseeable future. And that's true with generative AI in particular. I mean, I find that it's like a human sandwich. You've got the human prompting on the front end, you've got the machine doing the processing in the middle, and you've got the human curation on the back end. So that doesn't change. But I feel like, and again, especially as it becomes more voice enabled as opposed to just typing and reading text, we're going to see that data being put into the system a lot more reliably than we have up to now. And then secondly, related to that is, I suspect that there's always been a lot of data that has been talked about or was out there in part of a conversation that was never captured. And I'm not saying because somebody forgot to or just didn't want to, but it was just overlooked. And that's where I think these tools, these platforms will help us to analyze that and bring all that data into the systems, again, to help feed it further and help train it even more.
So let's take it back to the business that you're in now. So Revenue Path Group, you have a phenomenal sales methodology. You're working on people move further upstream, right, to become a priority sale. How do you envision sales methodology and the great thought leadership of a Brian and yourself? How do you envision that and AI working together?
Yeah, so we've already started down that path. Over the past probably a couple of months, I've been taking intellectual property related to the priority sale and using it to train a custom GPT on the OpenAI platform. So I've taken the priority sale book, I've taken some of our transcripts of internal meetings that we've had and other IP and trained this custom GPT on it. So now we're able to use it. The next time we have a client meeting, we can take a transcript and feed it in there and not just say, give us the highlights and the action items from this, because you can get that with, again, Fathom or Teams or whatever, but rather look at it through the lens of the priority sale and help us, at least initially in draft form, identify the convincing advantages that this client has, or help us think about really what their elevator pitch will look like. Now, I want to be super clear on this and say that the output from this custom GPT is nowhere near finished. But what it does is it compresses the time to get from point A to point B because it does all that assessment for you. And in many cases, I'm finding it captures certain pieces of the conversations and the transcripts that maybe a human would not have picked up on. So initially, I'm the one using it for some of our internal work today, and it's helping us kind of compress the amount of time that it takes to get from A to B. But we also have started to build an agent network where we've had people outside of RPG that are leveraging our intellectual property. And I just a couple weeks ago gave an overview to one of our first agents on how to use this custom GPT. And so he's starting to use it for the work he's doing with the priority sale. So remember back to that three-legged stool I was talking about, where you've got the methodology, in this case, the priority sale. You've got also the knowledge base for the client organization that the salesperson works for, as well as the individualized information for that particular seller. That first leg is what we're already working on, training a custom GPT to help us with, and we'll just continue adding to that.
That's really cool. Does it hallucinate and sound like Brian Gray on mushrooms, or is it?
I can't even imagine what Brian Gray on mushrooms would sound like. And Brian's going to kill me for saying that, but I think everybody will get a chuckle out of it. But I did mention that it did hallucinate on me 2 weeks ago when I asked it the names of people that were in a meeting, and there were 4 people in it. It made up names that had nothing to do with this, weren't at all attached to anything that we've ever done. So that's what I mean. You're going to find that from time to time, but it will get better and better.
Why is this scary?
Because it's of the unknown, okay? And because I feel, and I've been around a while in the workforce, I mean, I predate the personal computer, okay? But I feel like there's so much fear, uncertainty, and doubt at this it's all sort of stoked by social networks, which amplifies the concerns. And also, again, it is prone to hallucination and erroneous output, right? But I think the biggest thing that people are scared about is that it's going to take their job, right? And, there was a great saying a few months ago that modified the original saying of AI is going to take my job. And really what happens is, and I think what is going to happen is, AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who knows how to leverage AI is going to take your job. So it's just the latest tool that we all have access to today. And I just so want to encourage people that watch this segment to really experiment if they haven't already. And just, you learn so much just playing around with it and seeing what the potential is.
Well, out there in market, then you're playing, honestly, you are playing with the potential much more than many sales leaders out there today, right? Many sales leaders are simply saying, well, you know what, once IT gets it to me, I'm good. I'll run with it. It'll help. But what are some of the near-term wins that a sales leader can do to really, like, with the technology now? What are some of the near-term wins that a sales leader can use to impact and become a better leader in terms of using the technology now?
Yeah, I think there are a number of paths you can go down there. So one of which would be going back to prospecting again, right? What's the approach that this organization uses for prospecting, and how can, let's just talk exclusively about generative AI, how can generative AI assist with that, okay? Doesn't completely eliminate the human impact, but what are areas where Gen AI can be inserted to really speed things up? And I talked about a couple of them earlier. For example, this custom GPT that I've been training for Revenue Path Group, it's got a switch turned on so that it can surf the web. So you can say, hey, look, we're thinking about working with this organization. Please go out to this site and maybe focus on these particular pages. Help me identify what they're really focused on and what makes them unique versus the competition, and help arm me with what I could take to the C-suite to really get their attention on what we have to offer, right? So there's that. There's also, I think, messaging, and to maybe challenge yourself. Like, look at the messaging that you have today that perhaps your team is using on a regular basis, and put it into ChatGPT or any of the other platforms and say, hey, how can you make this more impactful? How would you shorten this? How would you tighten it? How would you make it more concise and more likely to generate a response than what you have today? Not that you have to use that, but I'll tell you what, after using these services for over a year now, I can tell you that I go to them throughout the day, every day, just to check my logic on what I write, whether it's something I put on LinkedIn or just a summary that I want to write about something I learned about, to help really make it more impactful. And you'll really be amazed at it. Now, back to the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. One thing to be aware of is when you're feeding that kind of information to the publicly available ChatGPT, you're helping train the model, okay? So that's why it's also important to consider maybe a paid subscription where you can turn that feature off and not worry about sort of leakage of IP.
I mean, is that a real concern, that leakage of IP? And tell me more about that, because I think that would be a benefit for everybody to understand.
Yeah, and I'm really torn on this, Paul, because I look at how, whether it's OpenAI or Microsoft, which is basically using OpenAI, or Google or anybody else, UAI is another one, how they sort of launched their services. And they're in hot water now because they just decided that everything that was on the open web to begin with was fair game, right? Mm-hmm. Now, you could make an argument that they went even further than that and went behind, however they did it, behind paywalls or other services that weren't intended to be in the open web. And I think that's a blatant misuse of that content. But what's on the open web, I just figure if any of us had brains big enough to be able to process everything on the internet and retain it, and then be able to repeat it back to somebody else on any topic, it's the same thing, right? And that's not, the only limitation there is the human brain, right? What these platforms have done is leverage deep learning and technology to be able to do that, which we can't. And so I figure anything I write on LinkedIn, anything I've commented on a public blog post or anything like that, I personally, this is just my opinion, am totally fine with it being used to train AI platforms. everybody obviously does not agree with that, okay? And I respect that. And I feel like at some point, well, the lawyers are already getting involved in this, and something's going to happen. I can't imagine it would be a full reset on this, but ideally, if there would have been a way for IP owners to opt in and say, yes, we're good with this, that would have been the proper way of doing it. But we'll see how this gets litigated going forward. But to your question of, as a part of an organization, should I be concerned about my proprietary intellectual property getting fed into these systems? The answer is absolutely yes. You don't want that to happen, because it's, once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's going to be really hard to put it back in.
Well, I'm going to go down a complete rabbit hole on this, but it actually, in the little bit of study I've done of both things, it seems like an amazing opportunity for somebody that's going to take blockchain and tie that to data and be able to opt in and opt out relative to what you own relative to data, like that open source blockchain enabled internet, which can actually identify and take. And that's neither here nor there. That's me talking out, lots of different places. So let's get back directly to sales and your vision for, we've talked all around it, but really what is your vision then for this? You said early on, it's going to change the way that we train. It's going to change the way and be revolutionary in sales training and leadership and coaching. And what is the end vision of that? Is the end vision everybody just has their personal Joe Wikert, the personal Brian Gray that I could just chat with whenever I want, or then I could go to my personal Stephen Covey or what do you see? I know you don't know, but what do you see, and what are the impacts that you're seeing to training right now?
Yeah, so backing up a minute on that, I want to be clear too and say that this is a radical leap forward, but it doesn't mean that synchronous learning in the classroom setting goes away, right? I mean, there's benefit to us all sort of being together and being able to kind of share best practices and talk through it with an instructor leading the course. But this, much like years ago when asynchronous learning became an option, so you and I could study the same thing, but do it at our own speeds, whichever's best. I mean, that was a nice step forward. This is a much more enormous step forward, potentially, than that was, because of the individualization, because of it being tailored for my needs versus your needs, and so forth. And so I feel like it's additive as opposed to necessarily replacing what we've had before, but it's additive in such an enormous manner, because it's, again, 24/7, always there and learning with me to help keep nudging me forward. So back before, when I talked about being a lifelong learner, I mean, I've had to invest a lot of time in that. I don't regret it, but I think that it's going to be easier to do that on any number of topics, including sales training, just because of these types of bots and platforms that will get to know us so exceptionally well.
When will it be a crutch versus a enabler or an optimizer, right? And have you seen it when you're using it? Does it become a crutch or an optimizer? Like what?
Yes. Let me just be brutally honest with you, Paul. I mean, I wrote something about this on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, how I worry about this maybe dumbing me down, right? And the analogy I used was the map app on your phone, right? I mean, before the iPhone came along, I always prided myself on really logically thinking through the best route from, home to somewhere downtown, let's say. So routes that I knew 2 or 3 different options for. Now, because I've just gotten so addicted to Waze, I don't think about it. And if I had to turn it off, I could get there, but I wouldn't be as smart about it as I was, 20 years ago. All right. So is it a crutch for me at times? Absolutely. And it pains me to admit that, because sometimes if I'm dealing with whether it's writer's block or I've kind of challenged myself to think of the best way to say this, or what's a better expression, what's a better headline for this thing I want to write about, I do go to ChatGPT pretty regularly. And if it's something that I'm doing related to sales and sales leadership, I'm using this custom GPT that's been trained on the priority sale to help me with that as well. So there is very much that danger of, it becoming as much a crutch as it is a tool, and perhaps even more so a crutch than the benefits of a tool.
Well, I wonder if I've been thinking about this a lot. I wonder if you would agree or disagree with this statement that I make. Because of that, I think there's two things that become, we're essentially looking to level the playing field of information a whole lot more, right?
Yeah.
When you start to leverage the playing field of information, there becomes two critical areas. One is mindset, and the second is ethics. Mm-hmm. So that become just an absolute critical thing to focus on, that I think the people that can most effectively leverage AI and move forward are the ones that will have that discipline built into them and can have that mindset and really work on that and really. And then the second one with ethics, because we're opening up an area that is so unknown to all of us, I think that foundational study of what are the lines that you can cross and what are the lines you shouldn't cross in general human interaction. And I don't think we can let AI run with that. I think it'll actually be a very human differentiator. What would you respond to those two comments?
Well, from the ethics point of view, every technology that's come along probably since the dawn of man has been misused by bad actors. Okay. And I would say that AI is the next iteration of that bad actor opportunity. It's certainly not going to be the last.
Yep.
But one of the things I worry about is that this being over-regulated, let's say, or over-legislated to the point where we lose momentum. And look, I don't want to be reckless about this. I don't want to create problems for humanity because, we want to race forward with AI. But I think that in the past 18 months in particular, we've seen so much momentum that to think that we would allow ourselves to be frightened into pumping the brakes, while meanwhile, the bad actors are just going to be pedal to the metal and not letting up one bit. I do think that technology is going to be used to really address technology issues with this too. Right now, it's easy to kind of counter that and say, well, there's services out there today that allege to being able to distinguish between human-generated and generative AI output. And my experience with them has been just abysmal. You get as many false positives as you do, true positives. And that seems to be the case with others as well. And I'm not sure that that's ever going to be perfected because, the tools are always going to be one step ahead in some respects. But I totally understand and respect the fact that this is an entirely new opportunity for bad actors to do things that we have never dreamed of before. And that is something we're all going to have to be aware of.
Yep. What do you think of the other side, the mindset? And I really appreciate your feedback on it, your perspective on that, because it's something we gotta think about, right? But then you take it on the mindset side. That is one thing. What do you think there? Is that going to be even more of a differentiator these days? The ability to effectively overcome a poor mindset and be an activator. Is that even more of a differentiator with AI, or is it just the same?
Yeah, and I don't know. I certainly wouldn't say that AI is the magic elixir for all the problems from a business point of view. At least going down that path. I do feel that again, it's going to empower us And we've got to figure out how we want to use that new power to save time, to be more efficient, and to really, again, get from A to B a lot faster. But I also am finding I have to challenge myself from a mindset point of view of, how do I want to use this custom GPT that we're training, and what is the best use of it, right? And also through trial and error, what are the things I want to go to it initially as opposed to as a second or third option? And I think over time, those things are all going to kind of get teased out. So I think that will sort of be readily apparent to each of us, and it'll be an individual assessment, right? So how I use it might be different than how you use it, but still, it's going to be another tool in our belt that we can leverage. And again, it kind of pains me to think about recording this today and realizing that somebody might watch it a year from now when so much of what we're talking about will be obsolete by then. This is such a fast-moving area, and it just feels like. And again, I think that these tools can help us keep up with what's changing and really leverage the best of them. Again, back to the mindset question there of really embracing that as opposed to being concerned about it.
No, and that's a fair point. Gonna have to make sure that this is on the schedule pretty quickly after we record it, because it changes. It's been I thought the world of lead scoring and email marketing and those type of things changed fast 15 years ago, and this has been just a new revolutionary rate of change, which is fascinating. And that's what we're preparing ourselves for, which was back to that mindset question.
Yeah, and one last thought on that mindset question too, Paul, is I've seen a lot of people talk about AI as kind of a great democratizer, right? So it's going to bring so much more to everybody that wants to use it, right? And it does, and I think it will level a lot of playing fields. But where the distinction still comes into play is how you leverage that new level playing field and what you do to take advantage of this technology that maybe your three competitors haven't thought about. So there's still plenty of opportunity to separate yourself from the others out there.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought about this, but like AI is going to give me the opportunity, if I want, to have a whole lot more time. Now I can use that time to go sit on my couch and eat Cheetos for an extra 4 hours a day, or I could use that time to, and that's where the kind of the mindset and the discipline, I think it's going to become even more important because of all of the things that we're going to be, all of that time that essentially is going to be coming back. Now you need to start being able to use that time and accountable for that time, even more so, I think, than this can give me an extra, 42 hours a week to watch Netflix and but I think that's going to be the competitive difference, is the people that have the mindset and the know-how how to use it, and then the mindset to then take advantage and value their time at that level, to actually do extra with it instead of just getting by. Maybe that's a standard thing for every technology revolution that comes about.
Sort of, but I think this is on a whole new level, right? So it's the same phenomenon, but amplified a lot more. And I think what we're also going to see, and we already are starting to see, is sort of a corporate equilibrium pressure, if you will. And by that, what I mean is IBM months ago talked about how they were going to have a hiring freeze, I think, in marketing and maybe a couple other departments, because they figure with AI tools, they're going to be able to do more with less, right? So that free time that you have may mean that you're 40 or 50% more productive, just to make up numbers here. But the expectation is you're producing 40 to 50% more results, which on the surface sounds terrifying, because it's like, how do you put 10 pounds of dirt into the 5-pound bag? But with these tools, you will be a lot more efficient.
Yeah, that's I like that. How do you put 10 pounds of dirt into a 5-pound bag? Because that's going to be the question. I think that's a primary question in a lot of the shifts you're seeing, especially I just had a 3-hour long meeting with an expert in SaaS, and that's what he's seeing a lot of, right? Is especially when we have and we could go a whole different direction, but but when you start to have a culture of information intake instead of information output, like how does that help with accountability, learning, and growth? And you're seeing a lot of times in sales, especially, that sometimes it negatively impacts that instead of positively impacts that. So that's one of the things I'm going to be really interested over the next year or 2 years, how this impacts sales leaders, salespeople, all up and down the chain. And it's been amazing to talk to you about it because I know you're on the forefront of this. How do people reach Joe when they want to chat with you?
Sure. Yeah, just you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search for my name, but also email me directly at joe.wikert@revenuepathgroup.com.
All right. And any last thing you want to say before? I mean, we're giving this all to the to AI, and they're recording it all. So what are you putting into the GPT matrix here any last final words?
One closing thought that I should have mentioned earlier is we talk a lot within the priority sale of this notion of above the line versus below the line margin, right? And what that means is above the line is where you're preserving your price point and not having to make concessions because you've gotten in earlier and at a higher level. Below the line is what most organizations default to by contrast, and that is cutting operating expense, cutting headcount, and so forth. And so with a methodology like the priority sale, we encourage above the line margin focus rather than falling back on those expense reductions. And a platform like an AI bot is going to enable that to happen a lot more seamlessly and to avoid those painful cuts to operating expenses that you've been dealing with up to now.
I think that's got to be the intro. So we did the outro and we're going to make it the intro, but great stuff, Joe. Thanks so much for talking with us today. Hey, everybody, we are in the Leadership Quarter. If you want to check out more episodes on the Leadership Quarter, you can find us at The Art and Science of Complex Sale, anywhere that podcasts are hosted. And as always, keep shining bright. Have an amazing day and let's go sell some. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for joining us today on The Art and Science of Complex Sales. Please take a moment, subscribe, share this podcast on all your favorite platforms, and let's get the word out. This podcast is proud to be brought to you by Membrane.com. We are the world's top B2B sales platform. And in the world of B2B sales, with everything from prospecting to business acquisition to managing complex growth, Membrane has the right size technology for your sales team. Our latest innovation, the Coaching Cockpit, empowers your leaders, managers, and team with the information and tools they need to take their skills to the next level and to take advantage of the exponential power of effective sales coaching. With our technology and the top team of sales partners around the world, Membrane is helping to achieve our driving vision. This is, quite simply, elevating the sales profession. To learn more, find us at www.membrane.com. That is membrain.com, or contact us via email at sales@membrane.com. Keep shining bright and have a wonderful day.